And so I just wanted to welcome everybody tonight. I know that looks like a lot of us are interested in learning more about electric vehicles. I do know that I've heard that sales of electric vehicles actually went up quite a bit in 2021. They grew from 85% in 2020 to they grew by 85% from 2020 to 2021. And with the rising gas prices recently, this is one of the reasons that I wanted to do a program about electric vehicles. I do not own one. And when I was doing some research, I kept seeing Jess's name come up. And he is the president of the Charlotte Electric Auto Association. He's been driving for 28 years, and he started with gas cars and then transitioned to hybrids and then fully to electric vehicles. Jess, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you if you want to go ahead and just give us a little bit of background about yourself and tell us how you got into electric vehicles. And again, folks, if you have questions, you can put them into the chat.
Great. Thank you, Christy. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to everyone. I hope that everybody takes this away as knowing a little bit more about electric vehicles and becomes a little bit more comfortable with them because they do seem to be gaining popularity. We're seeing them on popular TV, especially around Super Bowl. I think every other commercial there was an electric vehicle. So I thought I would explain first about how did I get into electric vehicles, and then what we do as far as Electric Vehicle Auto Association group. And then I'd be happy to take anybody's questions and do what I can to answer anything that you may have in mind around them. So to go way back, my father was a very efficiently minded person. When I had my first car, he ingrained in me about getting the best gas mileage as I possibly could in my gas car. And with that, that's something that I always had as a part of me. I did move away. I'm from the Charlotte area. I did move to Philadelphia where we didn't need a car. We walked around everywhere we needed to go or took a train. But we did move back to Charlotte and quickly realized that it takes about 30 minutes to get anywhere around Charlotte, and so therefore we needed to get a car. And the car that we did get, I think at the time was a Honda Element, and we got about 19 miles to the gallon, and I just thought that was terrible. So I wanted to look about other options, and we ended up getting what was then the, I think, 2006 Honda Civic Hybrid. I was very much interested in tech as well, and the idea that a car could be half gasoline and half electricity was exciting to me. It was that car that pushed me into what you may or may not have heard, hypermiling. That is where you are getting the best possible gas mileage out of whatever it is that you're driving. And with that car, I think it was rated about 50 miles per gallon. I could easily get 60 to 65 miles per gallon out of it. I think my best tank was 68 miles per gallon. So I filled up like once a month in that car, and I loved it. It was a great car. But the battery in it, I believe after 7 years, it started to wear out. I think Honda at the time with that particular battery had some cell balancing issues. They just didn't have the technology to help monitor all of the cells within the battery and making sure that they all were balanced out, which caused it to use more gas than it needed to. So I had decided at that time, and electric cars were just starting to kind of get their foot in the door. I think at the time you could get a Nissan Leaf, a Tesla Model S, and a Chevy Volt. The Nissan Leaf, I did not like the looks of. The Tesla Model S, I very much wanted beyond my means of getting. So it was the Chevy Volt that I ended up getting into. And that was a fantastic car. And it was a great way for me to kind of segue into being a fully electric owner. In fact, it was an interesting time having the Volt because I thought, well, I'm coming from a gas car, so I'll be okay with it using some gas. But what I found out once I had the car, that I loved the electric part of it so much that I hated that I had the gas engine in it. In fact, I would drive around in that car with about 1.5 gallons of gas because I just didn't need the gas part with my daily commute. I could use it as a backup for a long road trip, but for the most part, I was just using electricity. And I was really going out of my way to try to do what I could to not use gas in that car. And actually had some buyer's remorse getting that car, thinking that I could have got a fully electric car. Being the Leaf, even though I really didn't care for the looks of it, I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't have to use gas. My wife ended up getting a Leaf. She loved the Volt so much on the weekends that she got rid of her hybrid and got the Leaf. So we were a Leaf driving and a Volt driving family. We had those cars for a few years. I think I had the Volt for, it must have been 4 or 5 years. And then I got an early Tesla Model 3. When they first came out, I was one of the people that stood in line for 3 or 4 hours waiting to put their reservation down, and didn't even see the car yet. But I trusted Tesla enough to make this an exciting car that was willing to do that. Definitely have no regrets doing that. So presently, we both have Tesla Model 3s. I've had mine for 4 years now. I have about 70,000 miles on it. And my wife has had hers for just a little under that amount of time as well. But it was when we had the Volt that I was showing it off to friends, and they decided that, hey, this is a great technology. This is really exciting. Let's form a group and let's get the word out there. So we formed the Charlotte Electric Auto Association, and we used that platform to fill up the cars. A couple of ways that we did that. One is we would show up at Charlotte Cars and Coffee. Anybody doesn't know, this is a large auto show where owners can bring their own cars. And we were the only group that was showing up with electric vehicles. There's literally probably 1,000 cars that show up, and we are anywhere between 2 to 6 cars for the electric cars to show off. So we're there showing the cars off, answering questions, dispelling any kind of misinformation or myths that people may ask us about. The other thing that we would do is we would host National Drive Electric Week events in Charlotte. So this is a national event where owners of electric cars would sign up, bring their cars, and show them off to the public. Again, allowing the public to come and see the cars, ask any questions that they may have about the cars, and there's also some camaraderie between the electric vehicle owners. So we've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years now, and it's really exciting that all of a sudden it seems like, of all the work that we were trying to do during that time, I don't know how many people we turned on into electric vehicles, but this past year, especially with gas prices going up, we've definitely been much more engaged with news, the news and radio talking about electric vehicles. So this is a very exciting time, especially with all the offers that they have, because again, when I was getting into it, there were literally 3 models, and now there's probably 10 times that.
Jess, you had mentioned something, you said it was National Drive Electric Week. Is that coming up, or has that already passed? Are you planning anything for 2022, or are you still involved?
That's a good question. They actually expanded it to Earth Day. So there are some Earth Day events. I think that there is a buddy of mine that is putting one on in Uptown Charlotte around 4th Ward. I think it's on the Levine, not the Levine, it's that between Night Theater and the Mint Museum in Uptown to Cobble Street. And then there's the National Drive Electric Week is usually around the 3rd week in September.
Okay.
Because of the pandemic, we have not hosted an event. I'm not sure if we're going to host one this year or not. I tend to find that those events are starting to become more Tesla-centric. It's hard to get other models in there. Basically, it's depending on who you talk to, it's probably the best electric vehicle. So everybody tends to gravitate. We all started off with different cars, and now we all have Teslas, so it tends to get a little boring from a car perspective. But yeah, anybody can go on to their website, National Drive Electric Week, and they will have both the Earth Day event, which is around the third week of April, as well as the September events.
And the other organization you mentioned is that Charlotte, is it Cars and Coffee? Or
Charlotte Cars and Coffee. There's a lot of
Okay.
cars and coffee around here in the Charlotte area. The Charlotte Cars and Coffee is probably the biggest.
Okay.
You can see anything from a 1910 Model T to a McLaren to a 70s classic car, 80s classic car, and they're all owners' cars. So the owners are usually there to talk about the car as well. It's very much worth the look, especially if you love cars.
Well, I know you touched on this a little bit, but what made you buy a Tesla, or how did you end up making the move from a hybrid to full electric? What were the driving factors behind that decision?
So that's a great question, and having the Volt, I think, was a great. The Volt does both, right? It could be either a fully electric car or it can be a hybrid of sorts, having the gas engine. And it made me more aware how much better the electric part of it, the electric experience was. I distinctly remember driving home from getting the car, and it literally felt like magic was the word that came to my mind, because it made absolutely no noise. There was no vibration, and yet I could push the pedal and it would just go. And you become so accustomed to the sound and feel of the engine. You start to become accustomed to the cues of the engine based on how fast you're going. And when you take that out, it's a bizarre experience, but at the same time, it's like, wow, this is really cool. I'm moving down the road, I'm moving down the highway, and it's not making all the usual sounds that I'm accustomed to. And having the Volt had about 50 miles worth of range, and it made me want more. It made me, I could go 50 miles and then I was done. And then hopefully I was at home and I was charging. It made me want more range. It made me want to drive more in electric. And the Tesla Model 3, it was affordable. It had more than enough range. It's state-of-the-art technology. You're talking about a car company or a tech company, depending on your perspective, that is rethinking how a car should be and how it should work. And their focus is purely on electric vehicles. So the user experience, the technology experience is bar none. And it's been, I always joke, it's the best purchase I've ever made. And some people will say, well, what about your house? I go, it doesn't have any maintenance. So the house has, with all the maintenance that the house has, it's a better purchase. But yeah, it's been a great experience.
Well, can you tell me what it's like to actually drive one? Actually, we have a question from Ellen. So I'll pause my question for a second. Ellen said, is there an easy way to find out when a hybrid drives on gas versus electric without having to test it?
So if I understand the question correctly, Ellen's asking if, can you tell when you're on electric as opposed to when you're on gas?
Well, okay, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I've heard that sometimes there are, and maybe this isn't true at all, but I've heard that sometimes like certain cars will drive more on gas when you're on the highway and like change over to gas versus driving on electric. Like if I'm looking at my commute and knowing my hybrid would allow me to drive electric when I want it to. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Okay, and thank you for clarifying, Ellen. So it depends on the type of hybrid that you have, right? So if you have a standard hybrid, meaning it has no plug, there's no plugging in of this car. Say, for example, the Prius, it'll tootle around, I believe, under 45 miles per hour in electricity, but the battery is really small, so it won't last you very long in that respect. And if you were to go above 45 miles an hour, it is definitely going to kick on. And I believe that some of the hybrids have more capacity to get further up in speed on electricity, but if you give them more what they call load, more power, more pedal pressing, the engine will definitely kick on. Now, if you have a plug-in hybrid, it's a little bit different, right? Because they usually have a larger battery, they can hold more electricity, and therefore they can drive further on electricity alone before that engine kicks on. But again, it depends on your make and model. They may have some where they're going to kick on the engine if you give it more load or more power to help the overall power experience on them. And then you may have something like the Volt, where it can just purely be on electricity. You can punch it to the floor and it'll stay electric. It depends on what make and model that you have, but it definitely favors the plug-in hybrids to stay in electricity more often. Does that help answer your question, Ellen?
Yeah, that definitely, now that you say it, that makes sense, that it's hybrids that don't have a plug-in because then your battery is, okay, it's smaller. Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and guys, feel free to either put your questions in the chat or you can unmute yourselves and ask. I also have plenty of questions too. This kind of goes along with Ellen's question though. What's the difference between a pure electric vehicle and a plug-in? And if does that make sense? Because are those two terms interchangeable? And then for someone who's a complete novice like myself, what's the difference then stacked up next to a hybrid? And if
so, your question is, you want to know the difference between a plug-in hybrid to all battery or battery electric vehicle, and then how does that plug-in hybrid also compare to a regular hybrid?
Yeah, I guess when I just going back to the Super Bowl commercials, and it just seemed that there were so many being advertised. Were those all examples of pure electric vehicles? What you have, a Tesla, is a pure electric, what you would consider the purest electric vehicle. And is that right? But then when you're looking at all the other things out on the market, I guess from for consumers, how do we tell the difference between all of them?
That's a very good question. So I would say if you see something on the commercial, do your research, Google it. I think that a lot of what you see on the commercials, they are starting to advertise more pure electric or battery electric vehicles. The plug-in hybrid versus a battery electric vehicle is that the plug-in hybrid mates an electric motor with your gas motor. So there is going to be a gas tank, there is going to be a gas motor. You're still going to have all the maintenance that is required for a regular gas car or even a hybrid for that matter. What you have is the ability, usually with a plug-in, to go further on electric charge. So you're not so reliant on that gas. So in effect, it could save you gas in the long run. There is some argument that there is more complexity in a plug-in hybrid because you have two different systems, two different propulsion systems going on. It adds more complexity to the car. I guess an argument could be made for that. But for some people, it may help, again, like me, dip their toe into that experience. And it may give them the opportunity to go, hey, I really like this electric experience, and hey, I could probably do this completely now because I favor that. Or you may I don't like it. I'd rather have a gas car. And then if you have a regular hybrid car, that is, again, it's a gas saving technique, but it's going to still be mostly reliable on the gas portion. So there's some gas saving aspect to it. Again, there is some complexity there. The battery electric vehicle has fewer moving parts. It has a motor, sometimes two motors, and that's usually the only moving part in the car. So you don't have the gas engine aspect of it. So therefore, you don't have oil changes, you don't have spark plugs, you don't have transmission fluid changes. There's much, much less maintenance to a battery electric car than there are a plug-in hybrid or a hybrid car. Does that help?
Yes, that does. So I'm guessing you don't get with the electrics, you don't get the routine, recommended every 3 months, 6 months, or 36,000 miles, 60,000 miles maintenance requests.
Correct.
Is that
correct?
Okay.
In fact, the only thing that I have to do is just remember to get the tires rotated. With the Tesla, it's every 10,000 miles. So I have to keep a trip within the car just for tires to help keep me on track every 10,000 miles. Go do that because, yes, to your point, there's next to no maintenance to do on the car. The only thing that we have done to the car is new set of tires, windshield wiper fluid, new wipers, but that's it. There's been no maintenance whatsoever required on the car. Now there is maintenance eventually to the car with regards to, I think that there's like a 5-year some kind of battery thermal battery management fluid flush, I think is what they need to do. But I haven't gotten there yet.
We do have a couple of questions in our chat. Benedict asked, how is your experience finding charging outposts during long trips? So I think the question is how is it finding places to charge your vehicle on a long trip? I think that's the question. Thank you, Benedict.
Fantastic question. Yeah, fantastic question. Get ready because this will be a long answer. I always start off with it depends, right? So it depends on your make and model of your car, specifically your make. There are two different charging networks from a long road trip perspective, and I'll start with that, right? So if you're wanting to drive to another city within the state or to another state, you need to be relying on what they call fast charging infrastructure. That way that you can charge as fast as you can in order to continue on with your trip. And so the idea is that you're spending less time waiting for your car to charge and more time driving. So if you have anything aside from Tesla, you will be using the Electrify America infrastructure. And I think most of them are in Walmart parking lots from what I've seen. This is a result of, if everybody's aware of Volkswagen and their diesel emissions scandal, their big punishment, fine, whatever you want to call it, was to invest in a charging infrastructure in the United States. And so that's called Electrify America. Every other electric car except for Tesla will use this infrastructure. And I believe that there are making electric vehicles that incorporate that charging network into its navigation. So you put in your destination and it should route you through that charging infrastructure. And depending on the make and model of the car that you get, it could be as easy as pulling up, plugging the car in and it starts charging. You may need a Electrify America app to instigate the charging. And I'm sure you probably have some card payments put on there to pay for it. And again, those are generally at shopping centers, I think primarily Walmart's. Tesla has its own charging network, charging infrastructure. It is a different experience because they use their own proprietary plug. So only Teslas can use that for now. They are piloting a program in Europe to allow other makes use their network as long as they have an adapter. So the difference with the two is, at least in my experience, Tesla's charging network is not so reliant on a shopping center. They will have them at gas stations right off the highway. They don't have an app that you need to log into. You back in and you plug in, and that's it. You put in your destination into the car. It will tell you, depending on what your state of charge is before you leave and where you are going. It will pick the best route. It will pick the charging stops that make the best sense along that route. It knows exactly what your state of charge will be when you get there, how long you need to charge, what your state of charge will be when you leave. It will notify you either in the car or on the app to let you know when it's ready to go. And so the whole idea is that and I'm sure Electrify America is the same way. The whole idea is to spend the least amount of time charging and the most amount of time driving. So that's the long road trip perspective. The short range, my experience is that if you're driving a battery electric vehicle, and especially anything that gets 200 miles and up, you really don't need to use public charging unless you want to, unless you find that it will benefit you, right? So, but for the most part, you don't need to plug in. There's so much range in these cars now that you can park anywhere you want. You don't have to, get an app and rely on, where I need to park or to charge. It basically becomes if you want to, you can. If it's a primo spot, which sometimes these are, and you want to take advantage of that, you can. For example, we drove to Asheville yesterday, to the University of North Carolina at Asheville, and they have 4 charging stations there. We were able to drive directly there and plug in and get some free juice. We didn't have to stop there, but or we didn't have to charge there, but it was there, and why not, right? So we took advantage of that. The only other time I find that public charging actually becomes a necessity is if you're driving on vacation somewhere and you're going to a city that you're not really familiar with, or maybe you are familiar with the city, but you're not familiar with it from a charging perspective. You can either look at the car's navigation and it'll show you, or what I like to do is I like to get a couple of apps, one of which is PlugShare. The other is a Better Route Planner. And you can use those apps to kind of look before you leave, where are the charging chargers at? And, once I get to my location, where will I be able to charge when I get there? If I'm staying at a hotel, does the hotel have a charger that I can utilize? If it doesn't, is there a location where it best makes sense for me to plug in and not lose so much time doing that? You always want to try to be tying in charging with what it is that you're doing so that you're not taking time out of your day to do that, if that makes sense. Sometimes when we drive long distance, one of the superchargers may be at a restaurant or near a restaurant, and we can walk there and eat while the car is charging, so we make the use of that time. Most of the time, the car is done charging before we're done eating. You could stop it charging from your app. But for the most part, in my day-to-day experience, having an electric car is like driving a gas car without having to go to the gas station. And to put it more specifically, what I always like to compare it to is it's like having a smartphone. It becomes less of a car and more of an appliance. You use it during the day to get around, but then when you bring it home, you charge at home. And that's where you do probably 99% of your driving, or excuse me, of your charging is at home. You plug it in at night, it charges overnight, and it replenishes what you used during that day, and then you're ready to go the next day. And then I'll say one other thing, when I had the Volt, because it had very little charge, I felt like I had to, where I wanted to go and where I parked was dictated by could I charge there. And charging is a novelty at first, plugging in. It's really cool. You've never done it before. But if you have a short range plug-in hybrid or short range EV, I found it to be, it got old after 3 or 4 years of doing that. And I like having a longer range EV because it gives me the freedom to park where I want to park instead of feeling like I have to find some place to charge it. So it may sound counterintuitive, but having an electric vehicle actually made me feel freer because I don't have to find a charging spot to charge. I don't have to go to a gas station. I don't have to go out of my way to go to a gas station. I just drive where I want to drive and then come home and charge when I'm home. I hope that answers the question. I told you it'd be a long answer.
Thank you. We have a question from Kenny. How long does it take to charge and how accurate are the mileage ranges? 300 miles only gets us halfway to a destination, and how available are charging stations?
That's a great question, and I get that question a lot. How long does it take to charge? I told Christy at the beginning, it's always going to be, it depends, right? So it depends on your daily drive, right? How many miles are you driving in the day will determine how long it takes to charge. A sidebar, just a couple of things about charging at home. You can charge on your regular wall outlet. Most of these cars come with a charging unit that you can use to plug in and charge. The Teslas do as well, though they may have a little more versatility. They can do both standard plug and maybe a level 2 plug. Standard plug is going to give you about 3 to 5 miles of range per hour. So when you have an electric vehicle, you start thinking of miles per hour of charging. How many miles of range do I replenish back into the car? And so if you think about overnight, your car may be sitting for 8, 9, 10 hours. If 3 to 5 hours or 3 to 5 miles per hour, that's 30 to 50 miles of range that you can replenish back on just your regular wall outlet. If you step it up to a level 2, that's your 240 volt, kind of like your dryer plug. That's going to be about anywhere between 24 to 30 miles per hour of range per hour. So on any given day, I drive about 30 miles. It takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to replenish that range again. 300 miles. I have a car that's rated, it was rated at 310 when I got it. They unlocked it to 325. Like I said, it's been about 69,000 miles, 70,000 miles I've had this car. It still gets about 310 miles of range. So the loss has been very little in that. And when you're driving long distance, you're not actually going to drive that number of miles. In fact, I'm trying to get away from the idea of when a company says, well, this car can get 250 miles or 300 miles, it's not actually going to get that amount. I like to think of it as it has enough power stored in the battery that would equate to 300 miles or 250 miles. Because you have to figure in, you're going to have rain, wind, road surface, you're using the HVAC system, you're using the radio. I mean, all of that is going to eat away some of that range from you. In my experience in using the Tesla network driving long distance, it'll have you drive about 150 miles at a time before you have to stop and charge. And that's a good, depending on how fast you're going, that could be anywhere between 2 to 3 hours of driving. That's a long time to be driving before you can stop, charge. It could take about 20 minutes to charge. And again, it depends on your make and model. It could be 20 to 30 minutes, maybe more, again, depending on your model. But in my experience, it's usually about 15 to 20 minutes. And what I love is that I'm no longer thinking about getting to point A to point B in my end destination. It's now broken the trip up into 1 to 2, maybe 3 stops, maybe 4 stops in the wintertime when it's colder. And it makes it more accomplishable, if that's not even a word, but it allows you to break up that trip. And so by the time you get to your destination, you don't feel so wiped because you've been like driving for hours and hours and hours at a time. I love breaking up into smaller stops. And in fact, I love not only doing that, but getting out and going to the bathroom. What do I have around me? I especially love stops at the gas station because I have everything I need right there. They're usually right off the highway. I have a bathroom. I can grab a snack if I want to. Clean my windshield because usually bugs are all over it. But I find that 300 miles is more than enough range, at least for my personal preference. I routinely charge the car up to only 70%. I never actually use the full range unless I absolutely need to. I actually, when I'm driving around North Carolina, I try to map out what can I do to avoid charging. Can I get to my destination and back without having to charge anywhere? That's just my preference. I could, just get in the car and put in my destination and let it tell me where to charge, and I charge there, and that's fine. It's a personal decision. But I personally like to go hiking. I like to go to different state parks, and I like to see, can I get there and back without having to take the time to charge? If I can, if I have to charge, fine. It's even better if I can charge while I'm there. But otherwise, I like to try to do that. And I'll make one other point. When we drove to Asheville yesterday, I only had to charge to 90%, and I was able to get to Asheville. I didn't charge. I went to downtown Asheville. I didn't charge. And then when I came home, it said I had to stop at, I think it was Old Fort for 20 minutes. And then I was able to get home. And so it was just one stop. My wife, on the other hand, she has a Model 3 with a slightly smaller battery. She charged to 100%. She got to University of North Carolina, Asheville. She charged for about an hour. We got to downtown Asheville, which has charging stations. She charged for, I think, a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours, and then she had enough to get home. So she didn't actually have to go out of her way to charge. She was charging while she stopped at her different destinations. And that didn't have to interrupt her day anymore because the charging infrastructure was already there for her. So that's where you can kind of play with public charging in a way that makes sense, especially if you're at your destination. And that's the best. If you have charging at your destination, especially if it's free, you can use that, and you're saving that time. I hope that helped answer the question.
Thank you. We have another question. Do you have an app or a website to recommend for long trips or longer drives when when you're driving these types of vehicles?
Yeah, absolutely. I find a better route planner.
Okay.
It's literally called A Better Route Planner. It has all kinds of electric vehicle makes and models that you can choose, and it gives you an idea of where your chargers are, how many times you would need to stop, and for how long. I find that it's a little on the pessimistic side. I like to use it just to kind of get an idea of where to stop or where I'm going to stop. But I find that, at least in the Tesla's perspective, it's much more efficient than what the app is telling me. And you can dial in on that app very specific. You can say how much weight you're carrying, how cold is it, how many stops do you want to make, things of that nature to really dial in. The other option that you can choose is called PlugShare.
Okay.
And that's a great one that I like to use, at least from a public charging perspective, to see what's out there. And that app was started because there was so little charging infrastructure out there back in 2010, 2012, that people with electric vehicles were actually sharing their chargers with anybody who wanted to use them. So it was sort of supplementing what wasn't there yet. Now, I don't even think that that's really necessary. There's so much charging out there between fast charging and destination charging. But that's one that you can also say what kind of car you have and where you want to go, and it'll kind of give you an approximation of where you're going to stop.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see, we have a question from Enrique. Can a house that goes solar charge an electric vehicle, or will there be some difficulties?
I would love to have solar. My house isn't in the right spot. We don't get enough light or whatnot. I have some friends that do have solar. And it's, sometimes there's some people that get the solar to completely offset all their electricity use. And there's some that will get it to just offset their electricity use for their car. Some people like to call it driving on sunshine, which is a great idea. But again, it just depends on whether or not your house is in the right spot, whether you're getting enough light, if you want to take down a couple of trees to get that. There are some companies in the Charlotte area, at least I know, Renew Energy Solutions is a good one. I hear great things about Tesla. I know that they have a slightly nicer finish to their panels, at least from an aesthetic perspective, they're really nice. I have heard some questionable things about their communication. They get the work done, and I think the product's great, but it's usually the communication part that seems to be a struggle with some people. But it's definitely a great idea, and sometimes I really wish that we had it. Because we don't have solar, we do what we can to help offset by trying to be as efficient as we can. We have a small house, so we have less heating and cooling to use. We have LED light bulbs everywhere. We try to make the house as energy efficient as we possibly can to help minimize the added electricity use. And I know I'm going to get this question about, does it add to your electricity bill having an electric car? And it absolutely does. We see anywhere between $1 to $2, maybe sometimes, again, it depends on how much you're driving. It could be $3 that you're paying a day. So we have 2 electric cars. I believe that the electricity is about $60 a month that we're seeing, maybe $70, depending on how much driving we're doing. But that's in a month, and that's for 2 cars. And I know some coworkers out there that have gas vehicles, and they're paying a lot of money for a fill up that equates to about that month's worth of charging. And that's about 1,100 miles. I tend to drive a lot. So we're talking at least 1,100 miles for my car alone. So it definitely increases your electricity rate, but it's still nowhere near what people are paying for gas. And one of the reasons, just one more thing about that, one of the reasons for that is, at least in the Charlotte area, North Carolina region area, electricity is cheap. It's like 9 cents per kilowatt hour, and it's heavily regulated, so that does not fluctuate. I know Duke Energy is our provider, and they have to jump through a lot of hoops just to try to get a rate increase. Whereas the gas, it fluctuates, night and day. So, you're kind of at the beholden of these gas companies, what you're paying to fuel your car. There's a lot more stability with the electricity use with an electric car. So it's something else to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we have a question from Leah. Have you ever pulled up, this is a question I had too, have you ever pulled up to a charging station that has been fully occupied and had to wait? Do you anticipate that this scenario could become common as more and more people go EV?
So on long road trips, I have not. I've never had to wait on a long road trip. And just, again, Tesla's, how integrated Tesla's network is with their navigation is that the car knows how many units are available at a given charging station. It will navigate you to a site that has availability and will direct, as long as it can make it, it will do that. It may have you stop sooner if one is not available later, but it'll also show you on the screen how many are available. And in addition to that, just as a sidebar, it'll also show you information like Is there Wi-Fi? Are there bathrooms? Is there places to eat? And if so, what are those places to eat? It gives you a list of everything that's around that area, so you know exactly what you're going, where you're going. I don't think that that is integrated into other makes and models of cars, at least yet. And the reason being is because those car manufacturers are not building that infrastructure, right? Again, this is a Volkswagen funded network. And so you're taking one network and you're trying to integrate it into various car companies. Whereas with Tesla, it's all integrated. They all talk to each other. From a public charging perspective, yes, I have run into issues where I don't have, I can't charge there. But again, I usually don't need to use the public charging anyway. A good example is our trip to the Asheville University yesterday. They have a bank of 4 chargers. When me and my wife got there, they were all taken. And during our stay there, one freed up. I took my wife's car and put it on the charger, but mine was not able to charge there. But that was okay because again, I had enough charge, and if I could always use the Tesla supercharger network if I needed to. Back to PlugShare, that's something that if you use PlugShare, you can actually use it to check in to let other people know that you are using and occupying that charger, so that you can anticipate whether or not that charger is available. Unfortunately, not everybody uses it. Not everybody is aware of it. So you may find that you can't charge. Case in point, when we went to downtown Asheville, there was a parking deck with 2 charging units, and only my wife could use it. The other one was occupied and I could not. But again, that was okay because I knew I can use the charging network on the way home. Not a big deal. So road trips, I've never had to stop and wait. And one other note with Tesla is that they tend to offer far more plugs for cars. They usually have at least 8 to 12 to 20 plugs at their stations, whereas Electrify may have 2 to 4 or 6 and maybe 8 chargers to use. That's a good question, though.
And we have another question. How much does it cost to charge during a long road trip?
That's a good question. And again, it depends. So the electricity rate.
It's not free. Is that right?
Not free.
Okay.
That is correct. You will always have to charge unless you happen to buy an older model, Tesla Model S or Model X. They have some lifetime supercharging built into them. The catch is with those older cars, they do not charge as fast as the newer cars do. So with the newer cars, the trade-off is you're charging faster, but yes, you will have to pay. Depending on where you go, it could be roughly the same as a gas car. It could be significantly cheaper than a gas car. My experience is that if we were to drive to Orlando, Florida, charging on the supercharger network is far cheaper than it is when we drive to Jersey to visit family. We did drive to Orlando. At one point, we stayed at a hotel that had a destination charger. That destination charger was free. Our total cost of charging, driving to Orlando and back, was $30. However, driving to Jersey and back was about $50 to $60. I don't know what it is about Northeast. It has higher electricity costs, but the state, my understanding is that the state does determine how much Tesla can charge for electricity at their superchargers. I'm sure the same is for Electrify America as well. Gets a little complicated with regards to there's a couple of tiers of how much you pay, and you can really dive into that to figure it out, but I really don't pay any attention to it. I just charge and go, and it is whatever it is. And whatever it is, it's usually cheaper than a gas car. And even if it's on par with it, in my perspective, the experience is so much better that I don't really care. But that's again, it depends on where you go. It can be cheaper or comparable. And just one more thing I'll add to that is, when I stopped for 20 minutes to charge yesterday on the way home from Asheville, it cost me $5. I think it was $5.16 to get home for that 20 minutes.
Thank you. And we do have one more question. Do you think electric trucks will be made? And
We're talking about pickup trucks or semi trucks?
Yeah, if you want to be, I'm guessing pickup trucks. I know Tesla, I thought I thought I remembered seeing a Tesla pickup truck, and maybe there's another company, is it Rivian? Has one, maybe they had one, and I don't know if it's available to be purchased yet. But if you have any insight on that.
Sure.
No, go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Pickup trucks are definitely here. Rivian, as you pointed out, is currently releasing them. A good friend of mine works for Rivian. He was able to get his pickup truck. I had the good fortune to see it. It's amazing. It's definitely a premium vehicle, but it's definitely a well thought out electric vehicle. In addition to Rivian, I know the Ford Lightning, I think it's a Ford F-150 Lightning, first deliveries from what I saw were going to be delivered on the 26th of April. So that one is coming. Tesla has the Cybertruck. It's definitely polarizing in aesthetics, but it's going to be a beast. And again, I trust anything that Tesla does as far as the experience goes. That one is slated for next year. I believe Chevy is also working on an electric Silverado. I believe that may be next year or so. I'm not sure when that is coming. So they're definitely in the works, and they're definitely, you know, viable options. Especially again, if you take out all the fuel that it costs, the transmission fluid, the oil changes. I know pickup trucks usually have differentials. You have fluid that needs to be changed. There's no fluids to be changed in an electric vehicle. So, and that's one point that I wanted to bring up because I get this a lot. I want to get into electric car, but it's so expensive. A friend of mine said that to me. I challenged her to think 5-year ownership experience, add up your car payments, add up your gas payments, add up your oil changes, your transmission fluid changes. Christy, you pointed out dealerships like to throw in the 30,000 mile maintenance thing, 60,000 mile maintenance thing. I don't know what they're doing, but that costs money. And you add all that up, and over the 5 years, you're probably paying more for that gas car than you would if you had bought an electric car. And I know they're a little more expensive up front, although there are some options now where they're either lower in price or comparable in price to gas cars. But you're going to come out ahead because of there's little to no maintenance on these cars, and to fuel them is so much more affordable. I think that the big obstacle for people is do I have to change my lifestyle? Do I have, I have to buy a plug or a charger? I have to stop on my road trips. I'm going to run out of charge. But that's, it's a little bit of cost up front, but it's really, I find, much more convenient. And I try to remind people too that I've owned gas cars, I've driven gas cars, I know what that experience is like. I did not drop out of the sky with an electric vehicle in my garage. I wish I did, that would be awesome, but I didn't. This is a better experience. And people think I may have an agenda with that. I don't. It's just depending on your personal preference, and it's the better experience in my opinion. And I found that we come out ahead again with the financial aspect of it. But that aside, the experience of having it and driving it, and one other thing I'll point out as far as Tesla goes, and I know that other car manufacturers are working on this, but there's the over-the-air updates. The car that I have now is 4 years old, 70,000 miles in, and it's a different car, a better car than what it was when I bought it, because the car has so many more features now than when I first bought it because of these updates, and they were free. You don't have to pay for these updates. You don't have to buy a new model car to get the latest features. Tesla gives it to you for free. And that's, I know we have software updates on our phones, especially with Apple. You tend to get, feels like a new phone every year with a new operating system. Tesla does the same thing. They push out a new operating system almost every year. So you get a refreshed look and a feel to your car. And again, you have more features than you did when you bought the car. So they want you to keep the car for as long as you can. They don't want you to have to keep buying a new car to have the latest features. And that's what I love about the idea of having it is, my idea is having this car for 10 years at least, and not having to buy another new car. I hope that helps answer the question, and I kind of added more on top of that.
Well, we are getting close to our 7 o'clock time. There was one more question. Do you know anything about Fisker? I'm not Fisker.
I'm aware of Fisker. I know that they had a car a while ago. It had a grill kind of like my mustache at one time. I think that they're trying to get another new car out there. The Ocean, I think is what it's called. It looks nice. I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. I know that, Tesla kind of went through this, right? Nobody knew what Tesla was at first, and everybody was scared about them because they were new and were they were going to be able to support the servicing and the infrastructure and so forth. The same could be said for Fisker. The same could be said for Rivian, really, and I think there's Lucid as well, although that you're getting really, really premium with that brand. It's kind of a wait and see kind of situation. I think with electric cars, you could do, there's so much information out there, especially on YouTube. There's a lot of electric vehicle review channels out there. That's a great place to start because you're getting a lot of ownership feedback. Although you have to be careful because sometimes, depending on their channel, they may be slanted to give only praise. But if you can find those that can give a balanced review, those are usually really good to check out. I have heard of Fisker, but we'll have to wait and see if that pans out.
I was just going to ask, kind of as a closing question, do you have any places or any sites that you would recommend as far as comparing vehicles or brands? Or I found a tool on the Department of Energy's website that was a comparison tool that I can send you, everyone. But I wanted to ask you as the owner, if there was any sites that you could recommend or anyone to follow on YouTube or check out in terms of recommendations or reviews.
Sure. There is, I believe they're called Inside EVs. They're a journalistic site that does reviews on different brands, makes and models. They also have a YouTube channel where they do various, not experience, but various tests, charging tests, road trip tests, and they compare to other makes and models. I'm trying to think of there was another one, Inside EVs, and Out of Spec Motoring is another one. Out of Spec, SPEC. Out of Spec Motoring is another one.
Okay.
Again, they have both a site and a YouTube channel. And then there's different, depending on the make and model, there may be more specific YouTube channels. But from a journalistic perspective, there's one other one that's really interesting on YouTube called Sandy Monroe. It's called Monroe and Associates. And the reason why I bring them up is because if anybody's not familiar with him, he has made his career, used to work for Ford, and he's made his career tearing down cars and compiling reports on what they found. And then they make suggestions on how much, what's this build efficient? What are there opportunities to make this car more efficient, to make the building of it more efficient? And he's good because he was very critical of Tesla at first. And when he started diving in, he started seeing just how otherworldly some of the thoughts were on how they build these cars. And what makes it interesting is that he's also tearing down other makes and models of EVs and then comparing them. So although overall there is less maintenance to how an EV operates, there could possibly be more benefits to one over the other depending on how it's built, just because of there could be failures in the future because of how the car was built. That's a good one if anybody wants to deep dive into how cars are built, or how EVs are built and what makes one different over the other one from how it's built perspective.
Thank you. All right. Well, we are getting close to our the end of our time. I wanted to thank you, Jess, for sharing everything that you're able to share tonight. And if for those of you still on tonight, if you have any questions that we didn't get to, you can send them to me, and I'll send them to Jess. But again, thank you all for coming. And yeah, just anything else you'd like to share, Jess?
Just that, I really appreciate you having me. I appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to come and hang out with us for the hour. I hope this was beneficial for you. I hope that you feel a little more comfortable about EVs and come away knowing a little bit more, and hopefully this sets you off on your journey on learning more about them. So thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, thank you so much. I was just trying to get rid of the rest of the people. Let me go ahead and stop our recording.